Joining us now on the Deseret First Credit Union Hotline is ESPN College Football Insider and National Champion Trevor Matich, back for another Matich Monday. Trevor, let's ask you, after Saturday's loss at Boise State, are you more encouraged or discouraged about the direction of BYU football?
I'm encouraged about the direction of BYU football. That's a tough place to go win. And if you break down the offense and the defense and the special teams, by the way, you can see that there were a lot of things to be excited about. They made some mistakes, especially on offense, that are basically young guy mistakes that are correctable by guys that otherwise made a lot of plays for the most part. And so I'm overall, even though they lost, even though it was so gut-wrenching that they had a chance to win at the end, as I dig into it deeper, I think that the trajectory is still heading into a good direction.
I feel like BYU lost the game in the first quarter, Trevor, because the Cougars go down 14-0, and then it's hard to ask a freshman quarterback to bring you back in that game at Boise State, where they've lost 8 games since 2000. How do you see it?
Well, but he did, didn't he? And
almost.
The defense held Boise State to about half their normal point production on their home field, while the offense was struggling in the first half especially. And you're right, it is a lot to ask to bring them back, but that goes to one of the big mistakes. I mean, people talk about the end of the game, but I think one of the things that is correctable is Matt Bushman's fumble inside the 5-yard line on that double pass. It was a phenomenal catch by Bushman. He had to reach up and fight for that ball, and he did. He turned around and started running down towards the goal line, and when the defender was right there on him, he covered the ball with both hands, which he needs to do. That's a smart thing to do for a sophomore. But then as he was going down, his left hand came off the ball to kind of break his fall, and that's when the ball was stripped. That is one of those human nature reactions that is really hard to coach out of yourself, but it happened. It's just a natural reaction, and that reaction occurred. The left hand came off the ball came out. Otherwise, the BYU has the first down and the momentum on about the 3-yard line. Instead, they had no points from that. And so when you look at things like that, it's hard for me to say that, hey, the whole game we have to paint with a brush that BYU just wasn't good enough. I mean, there were just individual plays here and there that guys that otherwise were striving and doing really good work just made a mistake here and there. And to me, that's, you take that and that's real, that happened. But when you balance that with the good things that happened, you can see how close these guys are.
ESPN's Trevor Matich with us on BYU Sports Nation. There are several elements to BYU football right now that are a cause of concern, specifically from Boise State: red zone effectiveness, third down conversions, allowing a lot of quarterback sacks. But let's talk about why you feel like you're encouraged, Trevor. What was the best thing you saw from BYU on Saturday?
Well, the best thing I saw was the defense, because those penalties on offense got that offense off the field and the defense back onto the field. The sacks, same way. BYU still isn't good enough to enforce its will through negative plays of their own that make it harder for them to get a first down. And so the defense had to go back and go back and go back onto the field. And yet the defense, against a very explosive offense and a senior quarterback in Brett Rippon, who will be in the NFL next year, they were, I thought, for the most part in this game, nothing short of magnificent. I mean, 21 points against a team that averages over 40 on their home field under those circumstances, I thought was great. Now, you could pick them, be nitpicky a little bit if you want and say they didn't get enough sacks and all that. Hey, you know what? Overall, they did a really good job of making the plays they needed to make. I think that offensively, the penalties that you talked about and the sacks were the biggest part of it. I mean, we can talk about Zach Wilson, I guess, in a bit, but when you're going against a 3- and 4-man pass rush, even on the road when it's hard to hear, it's kind of important to figure out a way to not give up, 7 sacks?
Yeah.
Yes.
And then even more pressures. And so it's a young offensive line. You've got freshmen and sophomores all over that thing. Even so, I thought that they would do better than that under those circumstances. And then from a standpoint of the penalties, that really hurt them. I mean, they had 8 penalties, but they had them at critical junctures. And again, remember this, that a team like BYU needs to be able to stay even with those chains. And even though Zach Wilson has elevated that passing game, and even though some really good things have been happening from a standpoint of a spark on that offense, they're still not good enough consistently to have what was a 3rd and 5, have it turn into 3rd and 15 and get a first down. So those are the kinds of things that limit their ability to win the game.
How much of that is Zach Wilson not throwing the ball away versus the O-line needing to block better? And the tight ends and running backs, right?
Yeah, right. It's both. Zach Wilson did hold the ball too much. Zach Wilson could have thrown it away at times. He could have checked down more quickly at times. But there were times when there were a 3-man pass rush and they got there anyhow. And so these are things that they'll need to correct. You're talking about Zach Wilson, and you talk about some of the mistakes that he made. I mean, especially late in the game, there were opportunities to hit open receivers, and he threw the ball into the ground at their feet. He missed a couple of those things. And then there was that play at the end where they had 7 seconds to go. He drops back to pass. It was about the 3-yard line, 2-3-yard line. And they had an opportunity to run 2 plays there. The first one could have been a quick fade or a quick dart to either a slant or an out. And if it wasn't there, they still have a couple seconds that they can now go a pass run option because they were out of timeouts. Instead, he dropped back, didn't like what he saw, waited, and then tried to run. And people are giving him a lot of grief for that. And that is a learning moment for him. And I wish that he would have just fired that ball out of the end zone. But at the same time, had it not been for Zach Wilson, I don't think they would have been in position to be able to, have that gut-wrenching loss at the end anyway. So I think Zach Wilson is showing a lot more positive than negative, and pretty much all of the negatives in this game for Wilson are things that he'll learn from, and we'll see as we look at his career going forward. We'll see him managing those situations better. We'll see him not short-arm the ball to open receivers, but rather hit them in critical moments. And I think this we can see as one of the launching points of his career because I know he works hard, and I know he's learning. And so even though it's so frustrating for fans and more frustrating for him that the game ended the way it did, I see so much positive in Zach Wilson.
It's another Matich Monday on BYU Sports Nation with ESPN's Trevor Matich, college football insider. BYU has scored exactly 1 touchdown in the last 2 games, and they have been in the red zone plenty to, you would think, produce more than just 1 touchdown. What has to happen for BYU to find success when they get inside the 20?
Well, the penalties are a big part of it, and the sacks are a big part of it down there. People give the Jeff Grimes play calling grief because they think it was maybe too conservative down there. Why is he running the ball here? Why is he calling a run instead of throwing? Well, here's why you call a run. Because you've got a freshman quarterback who's been getting sacked. You've got an offensive line that's been giving up too much pressure, and you have too many holding penalties. And the worst thing that could happen to them down there is not to have a running play, only gain 3-4 yards. The worst thing that could happen is have a 10-yard holding penalty or a sack where you lose 10 yards and lose the down as well. And there were a whole bunch of those. So I think the play calling was appropriate given the situation in the game and what the capabilities were of the offense in the moment. And they've got to eliminate the mistakes down there before the positives can really come forth. Remember this is an eternal truth of football. More games are lost than they are won. That means unnecessary penalties. That means missed assignments. That means things that you do to hurt yourself before the defense ever comes into play, or on the other side before the offense comes into play. And BYU on the offensive side of the ball is very young, and they're still making those mistakes that harm themselves without the defense having a whole lot to do with it. So the reason that they're struggling in the red zone, in my opinion, the biggest reason, is because while they make 2 steps forward, then they make 1 step back on their own. And in the red zone, things are so tight, things happen so fast, and the margin for error is so slim that those self-inflicted mistakes will really stand out. Now, once again, though, I think you can see the positives, and you can see that when the corrections are made, it'll be like a switch is flipped. But for now, in the wake of this game and last one against Northern Illinois, it's just really frustrating.
Yeah, it's hard in that red zone sequence because BYU ran the ball 5 straight plays, if you will.
Yep.
Used 2 timeouts there, but yeah, that's tough. So now BYU moves on.
But wait. But where did they end up? They ended up inside the 5 with 7 seconds to go, and the opportunity for 2 plays to win the game on the road at Boise. If I told you that before that sequence happened, would you have taken it?
I would have, but I wouldn't have taken a sack on the final play. I wouldn't have taken that.
Well, but there you go. But when you talk about all those consecutive runs, people think that's way too conservative. But what did it do? It eliminated the negative big play from penalties or sacks, and it put them in position to be able to run 2 plays at the end from inside the 5 at Boise. And if you'd have said that beforehand, you'd have said, okay, yeah, no, I'll take that opportunity. Now, the opportunity wasn't managed as well as it will be in the future because you've got a freshman quarterback in that situation. But, what I'm saying is that the play calling is a function of who you got and how they're doing in the moment and what's likely to work the best. And that's what plays were called. And I had no problem with those play calls.
I would have liked to see the ball get in the end zone 1 time in the final 4 plays, though. In the final 4 plays, BYU did not even throw it into the end zone a single time.
And now they get a holding penalty or a sack, and now they have to throw it into the end zone.
Right. The risk is that, but the reward is that you win the game, and the ball never got in there, and BYU lost. Okay, BYU moves on. Okay. BYU moves on to UMass and New Mexico State. BYU opens as a 13.5-point favorite against UMass. That tells you a lot about the Minutemen, who just won in triple overtime, 62-59
That is
over
so
Liberty.
cynical. Wow.
Crazy, right? Well, they're just bad, Trevor. They're just bad. Do you believe that BYU will win the next 2 games and get to a bowl game?
Yes, I believe they will, because I believe they're really close to breaking out on offense. I just do. We talked a lot over the last couple of years about the receivers not knowing that they're in a fight, just waiting for the ball to come down, and if it gets there, great. If it doesn't, okay. Not going after it, with a proprietary anger that it's my ball or no one's ball. Well, I'll tell you, this second half of the season, I've been really proud of the receivers. We've got a young quarterback in there with tremendous arm talent, and Andre Ware, a Heisman Trophy winner, on the game broadcast was exceptionally positive about what Zach Wilson is doing and what he will do as he continues to gain experience. I think the offensive line is young. There's a lot of good things that are going on there. And I think that when you look at this game against UMass, I think that they're just so close. Just eliminate a few mistakes. Now, ESPN's Football Power Index gives BYU a 72% chance to beat UMass this week and a 93% chance to beat New Mexico State the following. So if BYU doesn't win those games, it will have been because they beat themselves, essentially. Then we have Utah, which there'll be a lot of time to talk about. That's going to be an interesting little matchup coming up at the end of the season. But they've got to beat UMass and New Mexico State in order to get bowl eligible. I think they will win both of those games, and I think that they'll be on a roll heading into that rivalry game on November 24th.
Trevor, great stuff. And like you said, plenty of time to talk about that approaching Utah matchup. But the first goal in line is beat UMass and then try and get bowl eligible against New Mexico State. Thanks so much for the time, man.
All right. Thanks, guys.